Timstory. I'm Timmy Young. Today, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about some things that's happening in life. And I tell you what, I had a story when we were kids. We played this game. I was staying all night with a friend. And the next morning, we went over to the ballpark at Shawnee baseball field. I think it's called Ed Skelton Stadium. And there was a gate you could go through or a passageway to get into the stadium. And we didn't sneak in. We just walked in, from the backside because my friend lived across the street. And we went over and we played this game, and it was kind of crazy. I didn't get a real good understanding of it, but we did it anyway. And so the object was to take 3 deep breaths. And on your third breath, you would raise up and hold your breath, put your arms together, and then somebody would stand behind you and lift you off the ground and hold you for 10 seconds. And then it would drop you. And I thought, man, that looks pretty cool. I saw a couple of people do it, so it was my turn, and I did it. And we of course had to be positioned in different places. And when I woke up, because I didn't know it was going to put me to sleep, I was in a bed of ants, red ants crawling all over me. I'm thinking, man, what kind of game is this? What kind of trick is this? And so I was just shaking things off and wondering if I was going to be stung anymore. But I didn't get stung by any of the ants at all. But I did look at my friend and say, man, why in the world you do that to me? But everybody was doing it. I just think about some of the dumb things that we would do as kids, but it was fun at the time. I praise God for bringing me through that. But today we're going to share more and more about what took place in 1974 and 1975. This was a particular time in 1974 where I stayed all night with one of my friends for the very first time, where I was able to stay all night at a person of a different color's house. My friend's name is Jonathan Charles Starr. I call him Beauregard. You call him Bo Starr. Bo and I were friends from the time we were probably 7 years old, because my mom was a teacher in the classroom where he was at Jefferson School. Many other people in that class. And I played baseball on the same team, and we were in Cub Scouts together and Boy Scouts, who were not necessarily together, but at the same time. And so we would see each other in different locations. Well, after a baseball game, I got the chance to stay on that with Bo, and it was an awesome time because I'd never been away from home before, because my parents were, we can keep things right here, and so we always stayed home. But I learned many different things by being able to stay all night with Bo. But that year in 1974, I was in the 4th grade. In the second semester of my 4th grade, my teacher's name was Miss Mary Monroe. And boy, she was a disciplinarian. And she would, in that classroom, I sat in the far left-hand side of the room. I guess it's on the south side. But underneath a table, she had a box. It said Ada Candy Company. And it had a post office box, and it said 8 Oklahoma 74820. I never forget that. I ended up going to East Central, so I already knew my zip code when I got there, almost quite a few years later. But Miss Monroe was very stern. She's a black lady, and man, she was a good math teacher. But she didn't let us play those games. She didn't believe in it. I don't want to hear no foolishness from y'all. But she would take her knuckles, these knuckles. And if somebody would would be in trouble during this time, we had more physical discipline back in the days. But she would take your head and put it underneath her arm, and she would scald that knob, and she would just rub those knuckles across her head. And she said, "Go be seated." And it was a pretty neat form of discipline, because back then, parents didn't mind other people touching their kids if they got out of line. And just in case that wasn't the rule, her point was, well, you can't prove I did it. I didn't hurt the child because you don't see any scars underneath your hair. But boy, it only happened to me once. And it was it was in a joking way. I'm like, I'm not getting any trouble with her. But in that year, in the 4th grade, we also had the big deal in Shawnee, Oklahoma, was always the Little Olympics. Man, that's the first Friday of every May until COVID. But man, it was always a great time. So all the elementary schools would get their teams together. You had the 6th grade team, the 5th grade team, and the 4th grade team. They were in the divisions, or they were classes of A, B, and C. So in the 6th grade, you're in the C class, 5th grade was B class, and the 6th grade was A class. And in the 4th grade, I was in the 100-yard dash, the 75-yard dash, and the 440 relay. We went by yards, not meters as we do today. And when we were running, it was always fun out there practicing because, again, we'd be black man's field with our practices. And it was always great. And I remember that year I won. I won all three races, got a golden track shoe, and it really, it was really neat because everybody in town was there. I mean, all the parents, all the kids, and you are performing. I can look back on that and remember and reflect. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but it was fun. And all the recognition that came with it, you get to go to the Kiwanis Little Olympics, I forget what it's called, banquet, and to receive your golden track shoe, because you get 3 first place, you get a golden track shoe. I still possess mine today. And, that was always a great time. And so the Kiwanis Club of Shawnee has always done a number of things here in our town that always helped us, as kids, as we grew up. But when I became a semi-local celebrity at that time, winning 3 races and getting a golden track shoe, that was in May, and we started baseball a few weeks later, and I'm on this baseball team. And this baseball team was pretty fun. The coach was a dude by the name of Arthur Giannis. And Arthur, he did something that was pretty neat. We had baseball practice one day, and we were sitting in the car before we practiced, and we were sitting on top of the hill at Black Man's Field. And he played this song in his car, and I'd never heard it. I heard of this dude named Chuck Berry. And Chuck Berry had a song, and it was kind of a sing-along because he would say something, then the crowd would say something. And I thought, man, this is kind of crazy. I grew up listening to Christian music, and every now and then we get some Motown sound going on. But this song was called My Ding-a-Ling. I'm like, what in the heck is this? And so I thought it was pretty funny at that time, but I only heard it 2 or 3 times in life, and it was only with him when I ever heard it. So, of course, last night I pulled it up again. I'm thinking, wow, was that so funny? But it was pretty. It was funny then. I guess it could be funny today. But knowing who the coach was then and how he took me in with his son Arthur Jr. and they were pretty athletic, and I appreciated that time that they took with us. But anyways, we continued on in that summer playing baseball. I played on a team, of course, from Jefferson School, where Arthur went to school, and we had people on the team. Of course, Bo Starr was on the team, and other people like Kelly Rose, Dale Harper, Phil Philippi, Mike Dubler, Robert Ramsey. A few other names are out there. I don't remember everybody at this moment, but baseball was my sport. I couldn't play anything else but baseball, so I excelled in it. I actually had started 2 years prior at age 7, but I played on a 10-year-old, 9 and 10-year-old team at the age of 7. And Jim Wesley was my coach back at that time. And Jim was, he's still around Shawnee, and he did a great job. And these guys always just put their arms around me and loved on me and encouraged me. And what I did not know was I was a pretty decent athlete. I just did what I would normally do. So my normal, okay, would have been other people's success, but I kept growing and growing, and my normal kept increasing. So my normal turned out to be kind of in the stage of being not really famous, but well known by other people. And so baseball games, we go out there and we play. And whenever I come up to bat, people would say, well, scoot back, scoot back. I could hit the ball pretty far, but I could also bunt the ball and make it a second base at times. I had a little bit of speed, not as fast as my dad, but I was pretty quick back then. And so, we had great ball games. And one of our biggest rivals was this school called Will Rogers. And they were sponsored by a group, Travelers Insurance Company, Travelers Insurance Group, or something on that line. They had white jerseys and blue and red logos, and they were good. And we were sponsored by Ned Perry. We wore maroon, and I really didn't know what maroon was until then. But that was fun. It didn't matter the uniform. I wore number 27. Never seen number 27 on anything else until I got to Oklahoma State, and Rod Brown wore that. So whenever we look at these jerseys from back in the day that we were wearing, I'm like, man, that's kind of weird. But the competition was always great. Will Rogers was our biggest rival. They won the championship that year, but they had on that team people that ended up being a few of my best friends. And Ricky Vincent played on that team, and his dad was a coach. And oh man, that man could yell from the first inning to all the way through the 5th, 6th, or 7th inning, however many innings we played. he was always got that yacker going, and he ended up being who I would call my grandpa. And then Roger Gwynn was on that team, and Roger's a good friend today. But man, those guys were good. They could throw the ball hard, but you know what? I set that plate and I could pick that ball up and make it go where it needed to go and get on base. But the one person I feared more than anybody else was this dude named Chris Skillings, and the reason why he was so difficult uh, to figure out was because he was so stinking long. You know, he was tall and he had this quick wind up. And I was always staring at the pitcher's knee because that knee is going to determine how fast that ball is going to come at me. And so he had a real fast movement, and my mind wasn't going that fast. So every now and then I would get lucky and just hit him. But playing baseball at that time, you know, was neat because when we all came together 2 or 3 years later at the junior high, we all knew each other already. I was already kind of a celebrity because, as I said, you know, I'm one of the only black kids playing baseball. But we had a great time, you know, back during those days. Bo Star was, you know, we were pranksters, jokesters, staying all night with Bo. You know, this may be a couple of years later down the road, but I remember one night we were at Bo's house, and you know, a bunch of friends over, and we had gone to the movies downtown. But before we got there, his mother, of course, drove us, and she had this great big, long, I think it was an Oldsmobile, a Buick, like a '98. It was so large. The trunk, you could fit a 2-bedroom condo in the trunk of the car. But as we went to the movies, we got to the corner of at a signal light at Main and Bell, and someone said, "Hey, it's time for a Chinese fire drill." And all of a sudden, you know, we're at the light and stop. Everyone bailed out of the car, and we start running around the car. And then we finally jumped back in the car and went to the movies. I'm like, what the heck is that? I didn't know. I just participated, you know, just kind of follow the leader. I'm like, if they doing it, I can do it. Come to find out later, some of the things I did with them, I couldn't do with some of my friends. But so that was kind of my norm back at that time. And just being able to, you know, perform well on the baseball field and on the track field was really cool, you know. But in my neighborhood, you know, staying all night with Bo was one thing, but going back to my neighborhood, you know, we didn't have all the um, um, luxuries that some other folks had. But you know, my norm were my best friends and still my friends today. Those who are still living. You know, I never known life without my friend Maury Banks, his brother Jannard. My cousin Mike lived across the street from my grandparents. Man, we played basketball. You know, with a piece of wood on a side of a house, or until Maury's dad put a real goal up, a real pole. But we use a bicycle rim, take the spokes out of it, nail it up there, and that's how we played basketball. We played marbles, and you know, we had boat races in the creek where we take a stick, a blade of grass, and call it my boat, and we put it in the greasy creek, and we put it down, and we would see who would win. We'd be cheering on this little piece of wood that couldn't do anything, and I'm like, man, what are we really doing? But we were having a great time. And you know, just the neighborhood races that we would have, and it was just street football. Every now and then we'd play baseball next to the Church of God in Christ, and hit the ball through the window. Somebody had to pay for that. I'm not sure who did, but back then glass was like plastic. I mean, little bitty pieces of plastic or cellophane. It was very thin. But anyway, we broke many windows, but we had a lot of fun in the neighborhood. You know, running around with Kerry Brandon and Robbie Quayler, Willard Davis, you know, Randy and Jeff Crawford, my cousins. So we spent a lot of time together doing a lot of things that were, you know, just a lot of fun. And just developing our skills, you know, and to see where we are today, you know, how we've grown up. You know, my friend Irvin Jackson, and he had the GI Joe with the Kung Fu grip. he was one of the first and probably the only black guy I knew that had a action figure doll. But you know, we had a great time in the neighborhoods, and you know, we did many different things together, you know, with all of our exploring. But you know, as we get look back on the things that we did that was really done with Bo and my friends from Jefferson School, you know, these things helped us bond together, and we grew together. You know, we stayed there. And so as we tune in next week, we're going to talk more about, you know, some of the things that we did, you know, what growing up. And I'm going to share some experiences where I discovered what it was like to stay in a hotel with a different family. We're going to also talk about the music that was going on during that time period. And my very special friend, I'm going to give you a hint. His name is Marshall, but you call him Brett Sloat. Anyway, it changed my life being with this family and then being kicked out of a league. So we'll talk about what took place in this little league next week, but you don't want to miss it because there's some funny stories that's going to take place then. Thank you for tuning in to Tim's Story. Love you. See you soon. God bless you. See ya.